I think it is clear to believe in the power of ideas.
Fresh thinking of the Manhattan Institute.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Over many years, attending police community meetings in Harlem, Bedford-Stuyvesant, and the South Bronx, I've heard local residents make all sorts of complaints to their precinct commander. For example, teens are congregating on my stoop. Can you please make them move? Or, SUVs are driving down the street at night with their stereos blaring. We can't sleep! Or even, people have been barbecuing on the pedestrian islands of Broadway. That's not legal. Now, had a white gentrifier made these objections about the same set of individuals, you can be sure that a large swath of the professoriate and the press would have jumped on him for racism and class bias. Here's the interesting thing, however. The disgruntled residents were themselves all poor and minority. James Q. Wilson's broken windows theory, which holds that the police should pay attention to minor infractions of public order like graffiti or loitering, is usually understood as a crime-fighting technique. Stop low-level offenses, the thinking goes, and you will block more serious crimes from developing. And so it is proven in practice. But broken windows theory, which Professor Wilson set forth in a famous article co-authored with Manhattan Institute fellow George Kelling, is first and foremost a moral imperative. It responds to the fierce desire of the law-abiding poor to enjoy the same civility and order in their neighborhoods as the residents of Park Avenue take for granted in their own. Appallingly, left-wing academics, such as the University of Chicago's Bernard Harcourt and Columbia's Jeff Fagan, continue to attack broken windows policing as racist. But while these professors and their media allies may have the gall to tell the aspiring poor that their demands for bourgeois order are illegitimate, Professor Wilson had the humane wisdom to recognize that passion for lawfulness early on, and to understand that the concern about something as seemingly trivial as an unlawful burger fry on Upper Broadway forms the very cornerstone of civilized society. For those of us who despair at the state of the academy, here is a ray of hope. Professor Wilson received nearly every honor that the American Political Science Association can bestow, even though most political scientists are far to the left of Professor Wilson's moderate conservatism. Such awards, which started coming early on, honored his seminal work on big city politics and bureaucracy, his eerily prescient research on police discretion, his magisterial exploration of our innate moral intuitions, and his unique blend of on-the-ground empiricism and good old-fashioned logic. Add his unfailing grace, open-mindedness, and preternatural calm, and you have the ideal scholar and public intellectual. This evening, I want to briefly focus on Professor Wilson's insights into public order because they illustrate how he went about his work and because they are central to the rebirth of New York. In the 1960s, policymakers were churning out one big government program after another in the name of stemming that decade's sharply rising crime rates. Professor Wilson had the crazy idea of finding out what the recipients of those federal programs thought their biggest problems were. Were the alleged beneficiaries most concerned about racism, lack of economic opportunity, or even violent crime? No. The 1,000 Boston residents whom Professor Wilson surveyed in 1966 cared most about what he called improper behavior in public spaces. Whites and blacks worried about teens hanging out on corners, men drinking in public, and women walking the streets. In writing up his findings in 1968, Professor Wilson felt compelled to address the, quote, dark thoughts forming in the minds of some readers, end quote, to wit, that he was advocating, quote, middle-class values. I will allow you to collect yourselves from the shock of such an idea. With his usual cool iconoclasm, Professor Wilson answered his potentially outraged readers. The desire for property and propriety, he said, are neither exclusively the concern of the middle class nor worthy of the scorn heaped upon them. They are the common interest of almost everyone. This episode embodies the Wilsonian method. Get out of your office and into the field. Ask questions. And when the responses demolish received wisdom and resurrect timeless truths about human society, state those truths with common sense and moral clarity. Professor Wilson's innate curiosity and epistemological humility resulted in a dozen political science books and one other that I would be remiss not to mention, Watching Fishes, regarded by Wilson's fellow scuba divers as his crowning achievement. This book, co-authored with his wife Roberta, explains the behavior of coral reef fish and, according to Amazon UK, here's the classic Wilsonian part, demolishes the misconceptions surrounding sharks. Wilson's curiosity about how police interact with their communities resulted in the order maintenance concept, which has in turn become cutting-edge urban policy. There's not a police department in the country today that doesn't practice broken windows policing. But here in New York, a group of urban visionaries grasped order maintenance even before the NYPD. In 1983, a year after Wilson and Kelling's Broken Windows article, the Mobil Corporation abandoned its New York corporate headquarters, located right next door to where we dine tonight. In a parting act of civic responsibility, Mobil produced a video to explain to the city's leaders why it was fleeing Gotham for an office park in Fairfax, Virginia. Filmed in and around Grand Central Terminal, the tape reveals a metropolis that had lost control of its public spaces. Some of you may even remember the kinds of problems that the video documented. The largest homeless encampment in the city, hustlers flocking upon tourists and demanding payment for flagging down taxis, graffiti splattered across storefronts, filthy sidewalks, and broken streetlights. The tape then flashes to the pastoral suburban headquarters of Exxon and Bell Labs as a question appears on the screen. What do we tell our employees? As Professor Wilson had explicated, what such squalor told the world was that civil order in New York had broken down and no one cared. Hardly an invitation to create a business and bring jobs to the city. And so over the next decade, Wilson's acolytes formed business improvement districts to put his insights into practice, most notably Dan Biederman at Grand Central and in Bryant Park. Their almost obsessive commitment to, watch out, these are old-fashioned terms, cleanliness and neatness, jump-started the transformation of Manhattan's commercial core from a disheveled bumbler to the glittering goddess whom we celebrate tonight. In closing, I will quickly mention one other Wilsonian principle that continues to fuel New York's vitality. In 1975, Professor Wilson punctured the conventional thinking that crime could only be lowered by eliminating its root causes. I have yet to see a root cause, he said, or to encounter a government program that has successfully attacked it. Instead, he argued, government could deter crime by increasing the swiftness and certainty of punishment, however brief that punishment may be. And that is exactly what New York is doing today with its embattled stop and frisk program. Officers intervene in nascent illegal behavior, sometimes simply asking the likely perp a few questions, other times giving a warning, or maybe making an arrest that could send him to jail for a few days. Such stops convey the message in troubled communities that there is a legal order still operating and consequences for violating it. Due to this proactive policing, as well as to the CompStat accountability system, pioneered by Police Commissioner William Bratton in 1994, crime in New York, amazing, everybody's imitating us, it's spread across the world. Crime in New York has fallen nearly 80% since the early 1990s, representing the greatest public policy triumph of the last quarter century. But, terrifyingly, every declared mayoral candidate has demagogued against the NYPD's stop and frisk policy. I wish that Professor Wilson were still with us to remind them how much is at stake. Tonight, when you go out into this breathtakingly seductive city, give thanks to James Q. Wilson, whose understanding of the precious, precarious nature of civic order did so much to restore New York to its glory. It is a great, if bittersweet, honor to bestow the Alexander Hamilton Award in memoriam on James Q. Wilson, and here to accept the award is his loving wife of 59 years, Roberta Wilson. Thank you.
Good evening. Our family thanks you very much for this tribute. And especially, we thank the Manhattan Institute for extending to Jim in 1997 an invitation to talk annually in its venue here in New York on any subject that he chose. Some of you may know, probably not most of you, but I know some of you do, how much Jim loved the West, where he grew up, and its great, big, explorable spaces. That temptation to explore also characterized his intellectual life. So what the Manhattan Institute essentially did was issue him a license to hunt. The 14 lectures he gave here, I don't think in any of them he broke any windows, but he ranged over a wide range of subjects. Some of them were the usual public policy subjects, but also some of his topics dealt with the question of such things as, can Muslim nations achieve democratic, liberal democracies? Or can our genes explain our politics? And even if heredity determines our behavior, do people have free will? Each year on the way home, he would turn to me and say, now I got to think of something to say next year. What do you think? Well, I can tell you what I thought had no relevance. It was purely a rhetorical question. But he would muse about a bit for a few weeks and then come up with a quest and then in the happy stage, settle down to ferreting out and teasing out the details of the issue. This year's subject was to have, this year's lecture was to have been last Wednesday, May 16th. I can assure you it was ready by the end of February, but it was not to be. And I can also assure you he would have been so pleased tonight to share the honor with Governor Daniels and Cardinal Dolan. So thank you for a wonderful evening, and especially Larry Mohn for being the issuer of the hunting license. Good night.
Thank you. I'm Larry Mohn, and I have the easy job, which is to send you home, but a few thank yous are in order. First, to thank our honorees, Cardinal Dolan and Governor Daniels. Tonight we honored Jim Wilson. Jim Wilson was an extraordinary scholar, but he was also an extraordinary man. And we loved him here, and we love Roberta, and we want Roberta to know that she is welcome back here every year as a member of the Manhattan Institute family. Also, Heather referred in her speech to somebody who just didn't read James Q. Wilson's work, but decided to do something about it. And that was Chief William Bratton of the New York City Police Department. You know, F. Scott Fitzgerald said there are no second acts in American life, but he didn't know Bill Bratton because he took his act from New York to LA and he reduced crime in both cities. So, Bill, if you're out there, please stand up and take a bow. We want to thank you for that. And then the really important thank yous are for the people that I work with who make this all happen. Paul Singer is right. People are afraid to walk down the street on the same side as his because he is passionate and committed, and this organization and this dinner would not be possible without him. So thank you, Paul, for that. And then for my extraordinary staff who get the food down on time and get you out on time, my development and events people, and especially the efforts of Jocelyn Kiley, who put this all together tonight. But most of all, you, because your support is the only thing that keeps us going. And without your generosity, we could not tackle all the important issues that this nation faces, both in 2012 and in the future. So thank you again. We have gifts for you on the way out, and there's a post-cocktail reception in the back of the room if you'd like to join us. So good night, and thank you again.
I think it is clear how fortunate we are
To believe in the power of ideas.
to apply the common sense and the fresh thinking of the Manhattan Institute.